Into order. Good evening and welcome to the June 12th Policy and Government and Committee meeting of the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Julie, can you verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. And this would normally be the time for citizens to speak. However, I believe we don't have any tonight. So we will move on to our first action item this evening, which is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? No, there were a few of us on the committee at the time, but
Just a question.
yes, Ms. Ford.
It doesn't mention when the meeting ended, like it has the time that the meeting started, but I was trying to figure out, like, okay, how long do these meetings run? And that just something to include, I think, in the minutes, to realize the time frame.
Okay.
I don't know if you can go back and put it in now, but,
Okay, we can add that after the fact.
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor,
Aye.
say aye.
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 Any opposed?
abstain?
Abstain.
Abstain.
So we have 3 yes and 2 abstain. All right. Let's move on to our first action item, which is policy 0100, definitions.
All right, so definitions, I have sitting over here.
Is it? What about the overview of the update? Are we supposed to do that first?
D?
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I
We had a
can,
discussion item
I
first.
can do that really quick.
Sure.
If that's all right with you, Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, no problem. Thanks for catching that, Mr. Borowski. This is Neola update 32.1. There were 23 policies in this update. Per policy 0155 committees that we're going to address later tonight. The policies were distributed to the following committees as follows. 4 went to teaching and learning, 2 to human resources, 7 to student services, 2 to F&F, 9 remain here with policy that we'll tackle tonight. And then we have a number of revisions to compliance officer and district address that we will do in our last agenda item, hopefully just as one big one. They're very simple overall pieces. But it's a pleasure to be working with Julie and be working with this committee. So we can start to dive in.
All right. Any discussion, comments on that? Let's move on then to our first action item, which is our first policy, definitions, policy 0100.
All right, so this is from the Neola update. It simply adds new definitions for the terms legal notice and official newspaper. Those are in various different policies. And it's just a very brief update. Legal notice, it talks about the various types of legal notices. We're only familiar for the most part with Class 1 legal notices in the school district. And then it just updates the official newspaper, which in our case is the Waukesha Freeman.
Any questions or comments on this policy? Seeing none, I would look for a motion.
I move to approve policy 0100 definitions as presented.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Borowski. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That would be 5-0. All right, our next action item then would be policy 0155, which is committees.
Sure. So this one, all we're doing is updating the D in the list of committees to say Policy and Government Relations, the title of our new committee, and then renumbering, or relettering, I guess we would say, Student Services. We did have one suggestion in the paragraph right under where it says the president shall appoint the following CISA rep, WASB delegate. There are a number of other appointments with examples. So the examples say in that first paragraph, TIF board, CISA, SWSA, WASB, NSBA. And the suggestion was some of those examples don't exist, or some of those examples could change over time. Like, for example, the NSBA, we haven't been a member of since, I believe, like 2011. So the suggestion was, maybe do we just eliminate the examples altogether? So it would just say, any single board member who serves as a liaison to governmental units or other groups may vote on any items. So we just wouldn't have examples listed. And the board president has the ability to designate to any committee that they so choose. So that was a suggestion we had for your consideration.
I'm thinking the TIF board kind of idea is a unique kind of situation that comes up, occasionally, that, that I think that might be one
Maybe just leave that
to
one.
leave that one in.
Sure. That works too.
Well, and does every policy get reviewed every year?
No.
No, okay. Because I was going to say if we're, all right, that'd probably be a lot, right?
Bigger job than you'd think, yes.
Yeah.
The last one there, the NSBA, we're not currently a member of that, are we?
No, we're not.
Okay. There be any other discussion or comments, or,
Well, it sounds like you're saying we could consider striking them all. Sounds like Mrs. Voigt's saying maybe we should keep them, so I don't know where we're at, what we think.
I'd suggest keeping them, but maybe scratch in SBA if we know it's not been around since, for a decade.
That's fine too.
same with it, was it your point, Ms. Voigt, that the TIF board was also one that,
Well, the TIF board is something that just happens when it comes up at the city level.
yeah?
Right.
Or county level, or wherever the TIF might be, be
Yeah,
proposed.
currently Darren is our rep.
And he's, yeah.
And has been for a while, but in the past, it had been board members.
Yeah, okay,
Joe Como did it for years.
okay,
A quick question.
sure. Mr. Watt?
I'm just curious why we think it's important to call that one out as opposed to just saying it's the president's responsibility to appoint to governmental units or other groups. It would fall within that, and maybe that's what I'm missing, but the TIF board, I would assume, falls under the classification of a liaison to a governmental unit or other group, right?
Yes, correct.
I mean, I would think it would be easier to keep this policy clean by striking examples of organizations that may come or go or that we may or may not be a member of, and just keep it broader in terms of specifying other groups. Unless there's something significant about that particular board that we feel it's important to call out that the president would appoint to a representative to it.
Yeah, I would probably agree that, I don't know that it adds a lot of value to have them all listed, despite the fact that the TIF board would occasionally, come up or whatnot, but, as you read this, I don't see a real value of having them listed, so that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Okay.
Certainly, I think the point of the suggestion was simply that we are obviously a member of some of these, not all of these. There's other examples, obviously, we could include. And sometimes in these policies, we find not always in the form of an example of just things that are listed here that would be something that we would look to. We had one in a health-related one last year that listed things like, the CDC or Department of Health, and they were redundant in the sense that we know that those are the places we're going to look for those guidelines
Sure.
as examples, and we actually had changed that one at the time. So if we would like to take this suggestion and strike this, we'd be looking for an amendment to do just that, if someone would like to put that forward.
Yeah,
Mr. Watt?
I'll move to amend policy 0155 committees to strike, beginning paren examples, TIF boards, CISA, Southeastern Wisconsin School Alliance, WASB, WASB, NSBA, close paren, in the third paragraph from the bottom of page 1 of 2.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 5-0. Ms. Voigt, didn't hear your
Yeah,
response.
that's the 5-0.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, are there any other areas of policy 0155 that we would want to explore here before we move to approve? Seeing none, I would,
I'm sorry. Ann.
go ahead, Mr. Watt.
Okay, so I was just noticing, there's, it talks about sort of the scope of the committees on beginning of page 2. I know President Piasek spoke in an earlier meeting this evening about the addition of government relations or governance to the scope of the policy committee, but I don't see that called out here. I don't know whether that's something we may want to consider adding and giving some sort of a broad statement around what that means to also have the governance component or government relations component, the scope of the committee.
Now, this is the outline of our policies, correct? So would we have anything that would fit that, to Mr. Watt's point, or?
I think it's actually a very good point. I mean, we could say policy and governance, government relations, all policy and bylaw technical corrections, as well as governmental relation work, something really simple like that. And then, to your point also, Mr. Watt, we should probably, underneath where it says policy committee and what policies we take advantage of, we should probably put policy and government relations, just to make the policy consistent. I think we overlooked that. so
I agree.
Thank
That's
you
a
for the
good catch.
suggestion.
So if we were to switch that to policy and government committee, is that,
Yes.
that's
Policy and Government Relations Committee.
Yes.
Motions?
Yep, that would be perfect.
So is it government relations or is it policy and governance?
It is policy and government relations.
It is government.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what's on our agenda here.
Okay.
I think I have seen it somewhere like that, though. Governance, I
have
think
to-
there is a,
It may be just,
Yeah, but it,
and
yeah,
official.
could be.
but it is policy and government relations committee, so.
Okay.
So then we'd be looking for an amendment to change that.
I think, Dr. Siebert, you might have the wording on that. I don't know.
I just said on a high level, it would say policy and government relations, all policy and bylaw technical corrections along with government relations work. That just gives us a lot of latitude in terms of what we discuss.
Okay.
And then also at the bottom, right underneath the 7,000 property.
Yes. It would say policy and government relations committee. And then it would be, we'd cover those 4 segments of policies.
Okay.
Wait, I'm sorry, Mr. Brusky, where are you looking?
I guess underneath where it says 7,000 property for the Finance and Facilities Committee. Do you see that?
I do.
There's a statement, the board president and the Policy and Government
I
Relations
see, I
Committee
see.
chairperson. So just
yeah.
a change there.
Another one.
Well, how about under policy committee, we have bylaws, administration, operations, and it just says relations. Do we need to clarify that as well?
Oh, no.
That should be policy and government relations committee too. Yes. Good catches.
So there's that note of 9,000 relations, I'm assuming that's a policy section
That's a policy section called relations.
called relations, under which I would assume government legislative relations falls, or is it relations?
It's basically relations within the community
Oh, got it.
in that policy series.
Thank you.
I don't see any other places where we would need that clarification. So I believe we have it in 3 places. And so I would be looking for an amendment to make that change. Motion, rather.
See how best to explain that. All right, I'm gonna give it a shot.
Go ahead.
You got it, David?
There's one piece of wording I'm not sure on, but I'll try to work.
All right, go for it.
Okay. So I would move to amend policy 0155 committees, beginning on page 2, paragraph 5. Add after policy and government relations. And then add after bylaw, technical corrections, policy, bylaw, technical corrections, and government relations,
Work.
work. Okay, thank you. Under committees and policies, second line, amend policy committee to read policy and government relations committee. And then in the second to last paragraph, starting with the board president and the policy add and government relations prior to committee chairperson.
I'll second that.
Did I get everything?
I think so.
Believe so.
You did.
All right, any further discussion? All right, then I would be looking for a motion to approve policy 0155 committees as amended.
I'll move to approve policy 0155 committees as amended.
Second.
Did you
Second
vote
by-
on the amendment?
Nope, we didn't.
On the Second Amendment, you're right, we did not.
So we have to go back and do that.
So let's go back and do that, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That passes 5-0. And we already have a motion, correct, by Mr. Borowski and a second by Mr. Moore to approve the total policy 0155. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Again, passes 5-0. All right, let's move on to our next action item, which is policy 8405, environmental health and safety program.
All right. So this is also a Neola update. It's designed to more closely align with the statutory requirements regarding indoor environmental air quality in our plan for that, and it's consistent with applicable law. So in our case, it says the board shall designate an employee to serve as the district indoor environmental quality, IEQ, coordinator for the district. In our case, that's Mr. Kyle McCarthy, who leads our maintenance department. We, like most school districts, work with a company called EMC, who helps us develop this plan and monitor this plan and then adjust this plan as needed. They're experts in this area. The district shall provide a copy of this plan to any person upon request. And then on the bottom of page 2, there's an addition on diesel exhaust and school bus idling. And so it references the EPA's initiative to reduce pollution. And it says, we take recommended steps to reduce the negative effect of diesel exhaust on indoor and outdoor quality on school campuses. This effort shall include but not be limited to reducing bus idling time and reinforcing smart driving practices. We do have a suggestion that came in as well, to say to end that sentence by saying when diesel fuel is utilized, from the standpoint that we currently don't use diesel buses, we use propane, and our negotiations that are ongoing with First Student will also result in us using propane. So while this is important to have in the policy, I think we want to clarify that we're not using diesel, but we would adhere to this should we at some point switch to diesel fuel.
I agree to that.
Okay, so just to clarify, at the end of,
The first paragraph on
first
page
paragraph
3.
of the last page, we would put when diesel fuel is utilized,
Yes,
okay?
I think that's a solid addition for us.
And all of our buses are propane, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Sylvia.
I'm sorry, Ms. Voigt, go ahead.
So when, that would only pertain to like buses dropping off for a field trip, like for a game or for, a field trip or something? Like when would, this probably wouldn't be a factor hardly ever.
I don't think it would be a factor hardly ever.
Okay.
No, I really don't. But it is recommended as part of the
Neola.
update, so I think we keep it, but I think we just add that qualifier at the end to just show that if we were ever using diesel buses or diesel buses would come into the district, they would be held to that standard.
If I could, so what does that practically mean for, say, a visiting team that is here for a sporting event, for example? What does it mean to reduce idling time? I mean, is there guidance that we would have to provide to other districts that bring in diesel buses about how long they can leave their buses idling or where they can be parked while idling? Or what does it mean from a implementation perspective?
That's a great question. I think as part of this IEQ plan, that I'd work with Kyle to say, what does that look like? Most districts that we compete against also use Neola, so we probably will work something into that plan to say, and that's going to differ obviously in the winter time versus the, other times of the year and kind of try to, but you're right, from a implementation standpoint, that we're going to have some guidance.
And I just had a question. So on the page 1 there, they took out at the bottom there several bullet points or numbers. Do you know why that was removed? Was it just kind of being cleaner with having less specificity than more for that IEQ plan?
I think so. Julie, do you have any recollection as to, we go through these updates with our Neola
Sure.
rep?
I know sometimes they will strike something and just move it later in the policy, so I'm not sure if that's the case here.
I don't think so.
I mean, I was trying to surmise that maybe they just didn't want to give specifics of what the plan should be, but
Yeah.
it's kind of what I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't know that we know exactly why they struck it. I think they just added the component about that it's available to any person upon request, so it's certainly not a secret document. Anybody that wants to see it can see it.
Okay, I mean, it wasn't hugely important. I just thought I'd ask. Also, on then page 3, that link didn't work for me, so I don't know if the link's bad or if something with my
Oh,
iPad at the time. I don't know if anyone else tried it or what, but
we'll try it quick.
yeah, I guess I didn't try it a second time, I tried it twice that one night, but I didn't try it like today. That's a good point. Maybe we can try it to verify that. Otherwise, I guess technically that's an edit to the policy. I don't know. A
Make it
clean,
live link.
a clean link. I don't know.
Yeah, I clicked on it. It didn't do anything for me either.
I got like an error message. So
What we could, go ahead, Mr.
I was just going to say back to the point that Mr. Watt was making about in the future, if this policy were to come into play with with our buses if they were diesel. I think this policy would have to be revisited. I'm not sure that this is very clear as to what this really means. So I just wanted to make that point. It was something that just didn't seem like would be practical for picking up. But
Sure.
I understand what's trying to be done here, so.
Well, you know what we could do? When I cut and pasted it and put it in a browser, I got it to work, but it should be accessible from the policy. So one suggestion, we could just table this one until August when we meet again. By that would give us time for me to talk to Kyle about how we might address diesel bus idling, as well as make sure we have the right link in that policy. And I don't think that's gonna, school isn't gonna be going by then, and that's not gonna, none of these policies are critically important to get done today, is what I mean.
I would move to table this policy, consideration of this policy until our August policy committee meeting.
A second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? 5-0.
All right.
All right, moving on to our next action item, policy 8420.01, epidemics and pandemics.
All right, so this is a relatively new policy. The policy itself came into play in 2020, understandably, right? It's now been updated just to add modifications, it says, for flexibility. We do have a plan that was developed in 2020, and the nursing services within that plan are updated annually to fit whatever needs we may have. But other than that, it's just a suggested, there's very little adjustment within there. It just says that we have a plan pursuant to policy 8405, which is the environmental health and safety program.
Any discussion on this policy? Then I would look for a motion to approve.
Also move.
I'll second it.
All right, any other comments or discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Policy passes 5-0. And our next policy then is policy 8450, control of casual contact communicable diseases.
All right. This is another relatively recent policy, came into effect in 2021, so 2 years later, making a little update to more accurately reflect the statutory requirements and authority granted to certain school staff. This is taken directly from state statute, so it's in our best interest to continue with what they suggest. The suggestions are on the first page in the second paragraph area under initial exposure, suspected communicable disease. Just changes the building principal to principal, isolating the student, and contacting the parents. We should add a period after it says, and may choose to send the student home, period. There's no period there. It then says the staff member shall notify the parents of the student, the principal, and also contact the Waukesha County Health Department to report the incident, period. There should be another period that we missed. And that's really the only suggested changes to that piece. Sometimes when you look at these that many times, you miss the periods, right? And they miss the periods too.
Do we have to make an amendment to add the periods or just do it as you're stating it?
It could be a friendly amendment, but you could just make an amendment to add the periods if you wanted to as well.
Before we would do that, was there any other discussion, potential amendments on this policy, or? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Moore, did you have something?
I just had a question where it says, preparation of standards for readmission of students. So what does that entail or look like? On the first page.
On the first page, which part, Mr. Moore?
Part C, sorry, under initial exposure, suspected communicable disease, part
Oh,
C.
yes. Mhm.
Could you go into detail a little bit, or?
Let's see. Health Department shall be responsible for conducting any,
Part C.
Part C, preparation of standards for readmission of students who have recovered from casual contact communicable diseases. That's all within the plan that we have. So like in COVID, it was whatever the county recommended. You know, at one point, I think it was 10 days, and then at another point, it became 5. And then we started, so we follow the county guidance in those pieces.
Because it was variable days, that's why I
Yes,
was.
yeah. So over time, and hopefully, we're not going to be using these policies anytime soon, right? That's my hope, at least. But in all of these cases, we work very closely with Waukesha County Health, and then we also follow, to the greatest extent we can, the Department of Health Services at the state level, and then the federal guidance as well, but most closely, the county is who we work with.
You're right.
Mr. Zuby,
Yes, Mr. Watt.
just a quick question here. So, in reading under initial exposure, suspected communicable diseases, if a student exhibits symptoms of a communicable disease, et cetera, teacher, schools, will isolate the student, and contact the parents and may choose to send the student home. The staff member shall notify the parent, student, principal, and Waukesha County Health Department. So, help me understand what falls under communicable disease. Do we do this today, like with anyone who may have the flu or a cold,
No.
or,
No.
so,
No, my understanding is this is much more around, like, on the second paragraph, diphtheria, scarlet fever, whooping
Oh,
cough,
I'm
mumps,
sorry.
Does list them, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, measles, rubella. So those are listed, I believe, statutorily as the ones
that,
at the end of the policy.
around, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. These things get a little cumbersome, and we all have COVID on the mind, right? Because these were all created for COVID, but they have other applicability too that potentially we could see prior to any more COVID, hopefully.
Okay. So we have a couple grammatical things to change. We do that as a friendly amendment.
Sure.
And all those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So 5-0 to amend policy 8450. So then would there be any further discussion?
I just want to clarify one thing. So back to, I guess it would be the fourth paragraph, right under initial exposure. First sentence, principal will isolate the student in the building and contact the parents and may choose to send the student home. That's the principal that's deciding to send the student home, correct? Not the parents.
Right.
All right, that's what I thought. When I first read it, I thought it was the parents, and I was like,
Sure.
okay. So, all right, and I think it reads grammatically correct. I just wanted to make sure that.
No, that's a good question. Thank you.
I'd be looking for a motion to approve this policy as amended.
so moved.
So, second.
Seconded by Mr. Moore. Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 5-0 as amended. All right, our next policy is policy 8600 on transportation.
All right, so this also is a Neola policy update, revised to incorporate regulatory language around video and audio surveillance on buses, which we do have in collaboration with First Student. We do have cameras and we do have audio available as well for surveillance. So we currently do not communicate that. So we will need to update that, and I already talked to our our transportation department. We will put that in our busing rules going out this fall, that is to comply with this policy, that we do have video and audio recording on buses. So that'll be an update for us. That'll go out in August. And one of the suggestions we had, again, on the first page, there are 2 sentence insertions down on the bottom. The first being, it is strongly recommended that the district provide notification to parents regarding video and audio on district buses. The second, the district's process for signing up for transportation services shall include notice of the policies regarding student behavior and conduct expectations and regarding surveillance technology on buses if applicable. The suggestion was those 2 sentences may be somewhat redundant, because if we provide notifications to parents regarding it, but then again we say regarding surveillance technology on the buses, we can leave it, certainly, but the thought was, is that redundant? If nothing else, it makes sure that it's clear and that parents will be notified that that is on buses. So I think we could go either way on leaving it as it is or taking the first sentence out.
I guess one thought is to make it clear, or I guess to keep them both to a degree, we could just add the statement, "it is strongly," that starts with "it is strongly." Well, I guess I'll just read it. We could have it read, "It is strongly recommended that the district provide notification to parents regarding video and audio on district buses, including the process for signing up for transportation services." I don't know if it's necessary, but
I see what you're saying.
that's basically saying,
The second sentence covers a lot of the pieces that we currently have about behavior and conduct on the buses. So I think we could work that all into one sentence if we wanted, or we could just leave it as it reads, and I don't think it hurts us either.
I think the second sentence is more important than the first. Because I think we have to be stressing the student behavior, knowing some of the issues that they've been having on the buses
Sure.
this past year. You know, and like maybe throw in this, you know, that notion to notify the parents that, you know, we're going to be able to tell you if your kid's not behaving, because we have both of these, you know, video and audio surveillance in place. You know, like it's kind of a, yes, we expect good behavior and we're monitoring it. You know, kind of a explanation for parents when they're signing up for bus transportation. So I think, you know, we can incorporate that sentence into the second, but I think we definitely have to keep the second, because that's, student behavior component is necessary.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Didn't see whose hand was first.
It doesn't-
Mr. Watt, go ahead.
Okay, so, in reading this, it does feel to me that the first highlighted sentence is extraneous, provided that we add language that says regarding video and audio surveillance technology on the buses.
There you go.
So, I mean, obviously, if we're stating we shall have a process that includes the notice, then it doesn't really matter whether we say it's strongly recommended we do it. We're doing it, right?
Yes.
So, given that, I am going to offer an amendment. I would move to amend policy 8600 by striking the 9th paragraph, which reads, "It is strongly recommended that the district provide notification to parents regarding audio or video and audio on district buses," and then amend the following paragraph to add between the words regarding and surveillance, the words video and audio. And strike the word "the" and insert "district" before the word "buses."
I didn't catch that last part.
Yeah, so if you, just the last part about district.
Yeah, on buses.
Yeah, so if you read
Oh.
at the very end, it says surveillance technology
Yep.
on the buses. I just want to clarify that it's district buses.
Would I have a second to the amendment?
Second.
Any further discussion? Go ahead, Mr.
Yes,
Moore.
yes, I would like to. I agree with both Mr. Watt and Mrs. Voigt. I think the second one is now clear. I think it emphasizes the importance of good behavior and understanding that understanding, helping the parents and students understand their role in attending school and what the expectations are. And so I'm very pleased with the new changes in amendment, and I hope that it's going to reduce some behavior problems on the bus, and understand that, we're providing you all your family transportation, so we expect in return, well manners, good behavior on the bus to go to school. So I would like to even see, I would hope that not only the students, being notified, but, I don't know if we can put it in there. I would even go extreme and say, parents should be required to sign a contract, understanding the notification of this policy. But maybe that's just me. So.
So one question, in striking the sentence that begins with, "It is strongly recommended to provide notification to parents." I believe we're capturing the notification of parents somewhere here. I'm just not seeing it at the moment. Does anybody,
If I might, I think it gets stronger because it says the district's process for signing up transportation services shall include, and then it says, notice regarding surveillance, video and audio technology, as opposed to it's strongly recommended. So it's saying we will do that. So we will add it to our bus
Who else
sign-up
would
process.
Go to if not the parents or guardians, right? Am I right about that?
I think we're implying the right thing. I mean, if we want to say parents, we could.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we could say, to Mr. Zenobia's point, we could say, shall include notice to parents of the policies regarding.
I mean, in reality, the only people that sign up for district transportation services are parents
Yeah, true.
And guardians.
and
So
guardians.
it's kind of redundant,
correct.
or it's
Family members,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, if someone wants to add that, I would take it as a friendly addition to my amendment, so it doesn't matter to me. Either way, I'm fine with it.
add which part, the notification of parents?
Yeah, if someone wanted to find a way to put parents into the notification piece of that paragraph I'm amending,
I don't know, to Dr. Siebert's point,
shall include parental notice of the notice to parents. I tend to agree, though. I mean, if they're the people who are getting the notice,
Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessary for us to specify that. in-
Right.
I don't think so.
Okay.
So basically, we're leaving the amendment, it sounds like, what Mr. Wad stated.
Okay.
I think we voted on that already, correct?
No, not yet.
No, we have to vote on
We
the
just
amendment.
Not on
seconded
the
it, but not
amendment.
voted, okay.
Right, we were still deciding what all the amendment would
Yep.
need, but Mr. Watt had put forward the amendment, it was seconded. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment of policy 8600?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
So 5-0. If we have further discussion on the policy overall, but now that we've amended it, motion to approve policy 8600 as amended.
before we do, I do have just a quick question.
Sure.
So, at this time, it sounds like we don't provide any sort of notification about the surveillance that occurs, or is this just codifying that we will?
We do not currently. We looked through it today. There's nothing in our bus sign-up information, so we will add it.
Okay. Is there any reason why we wouldn't want to notify parents that this surveillance occurs?
No.
Was there a decision made not to provide that notice previously? It was just,
No, I don't believe there was. I think it just is a newer occurrence, and just didn't get added to the form, so I believe that's the best way to say it. Yeah.
And Dr. Siebert, all of the buses can, right now, have surveillance,
That's
correct?
my understanding.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Then I would be looking for a motion to approve policy 8600, transportation as amended.
I so move.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Moore. Motion by Mrs. Voigt. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 5-0 as amended. All right, let's move on to policy 8800, religious and patriotic ceremonies and observances.
All right. So, we'll probably talk about these two, I'll just talk about the next two because they kind of go together. So it's essentially taking the one we're going to talk about right now, 8,800, and it's going to separate out the religious from the patriotic ceremonies and observances. So ultimately, the one we're going to talk about right now is religious activities and observances, and then they're separating out the patriotic activities and observances into the next policy, 8802. So it's siphoning them off. It's in response to a U.S. Supreme Court decision, Kennedy versus Bremerton, that was in the state of Washington, and it is reinforcing employees' rights to free exercise of religion as a First Amendment right, essentially, if you will. So it's acknowledging, it's taking the first paragraph out, rewriting the first paragraph. As public employees while on duty acting within the scope of employment or official duties. What is already been in our policy is in the third paragraph, not counting the one that's crossed off. The first sentence, district staff members shall not use prayer, religious readings, or religious symbols as a devotional exercise or in an act of worship or celebration. So that's already in our policy. What's being added is staff are expected to avoid circumstances where the staff member's expression of religious views could be reasonably construed as an endorsement or approval of the message by the school or district. Nothing in this policy or its application shall serve to prohibit or interfere with any staff member's free exercise of their religious views in circumstances not covered by this policy. And then it goes on to talk about nothing in this policy prohibits teaching about various religions and religious practices in a manner consistent with any adopted district course curriculum. This instruction may include discussion of religious holidays and customs in a manner related to curriculum that does not give the appearance of an endorsement of one religion over other religions, or favoring either system of religious beliefs or of other beliefs, such as atheism or agnosticism. Observation of religious holidays through devotional exercises or acts of worship is also prohibited. So if you're thinking like it sounds kind of like our controversial issues in the classroom policy, it's kind of similar. It's like we don't want our staff to be expressing their own beliefs. We want our staff, and nearly, I would say, 99.9% of the time this is happening, right? Where the teacher is a very good facilitator of the discussion, getting kids to understand the various perspectives and letting them make their own decisions. But there's also a part about students are not prohibited by this policy or any guideline promulgated pursuant to this policy from engaging in free individual and voluntary exercise or expression of their religious beliefs. However, such exercise and expression may be limited to lunch periods or other non-instructional time periods when students are free to associate or on an individual basis in the manner that does not disrupt the educational process. An example of that would be something like the prayer around the flagpole kind of concept, early in the morning, before school, completely optional, student-driven, student-led, not staff-led, not coach-led at a game, things like that. But if nothing prohibits a group of students from saying, I want to do that outside of the instructional day, they can organize that themselves, very similar to our clubs and activities. And I think the other thing just to point out on the back page, page 2, things that are already in our policy, the board shall not conduct or sanction a baccalaureate service in conjunction with graduation ceremonies. So that's a service that's like in a church prior to the graduation ceremony. That hasn't been allowed. And the board shall not include religious invocations, benedictions, or formal prayer at any school-sponsored event. So again, not driven by staff, but if students on their own accord and their own initiative put that together, that's different during those non-instructional times, if that makes sense.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Watt?
Thank you. So, Dr. Siebert, I appreciate you calling out, when you were talking about, students being able to engage in, group prayer on their own time, essentially non-instructional time. You called out, say, coach-led. Now, we have seen over the years a number of instances in which there have been pretty significant battles in different communities when coaches have participated in, say, a post-game prayer with players maybe from their own team or both teams that gather at midfield. I'm looking at this and I'm trying to figure out, first of all, would that be allowed under this new division? When I see language added that didn't exist before, like staff are expected to avoid circumstances where the staff member's expression of religious views could be reasonably construed as an endorsement, right? And did we ever have any sort of, so that seems to add some language that didn't exist before to policy, that I wonder if it can create this kind of a situation with any sports team, right, where a coach may voluntarily choose to engage in a prayer with members of his or her team that they are coaching.
That's a good point. I looked into this as best as I could to find out what our current practice is. And what I was told was that there is no team prayer, there is no coach-led prayer, but nothing precludes a student or a group of students from doing it on their own initiative. Now, does that mean if there's, I'm seeing it too, right? It's a football game, it's the end of the game, both teams kind of gather at the 50. Can a coach go out there? I think we need to dive into that a little bit and think about what does that mean? Because they wouldn't be leading it, right? But can they be around it? I'm guessing the answer to that might be yes.
Yeah, so my concern here is preserving the religious freedom of the coach, right? I understand that this policy basically explicitly states the students could do that.
Right.
Or the athletes could do it. What I'm concerned about is that coaches that might otherwise want to partake or participate in that, not lead it, but participate in it, may feel as though this policy prohibits them from doing so.
I can understand where you're coming from.
If I could add to that, I think just to expand on what Mr. Wad said, I think this would get real sticky if we're using the coaches on the field analogy. If a coach is praying after a game before and students join them, okay, versus the students are there, then staff joins them. I guess my point being, where's the gray area there? You know, anyone could say that it was led by staff after the fact in either case, even though it wasn't, the staff wasn't compelling any students to join them or to, if they joined or if the students joined. I mean, my concern is we have a number of groups, even clubs, where there's staff and students. Now, none of those are religious in nature, I believe, but the point being, we have those interactions already with staff and different types of clubs. And anything could be construed as some type of religious, anything religious could come into
Yeah.
any of those things, interactions between staff and students, whether it's visible on a field or not. And so, part of that issue also becomes, a student's perception of what's going on, a member of a staff that's, their perception of what's happening. And the paragraph that was mentioned, which is, I believe paragraph 3,
Yes.
it really starts to, I think, maybe muddy the waters as to what's allowed.
Well, what's interesting is the actual court case in Washington is a high school football coach who was praying with his kids and was told to stop by the district. He continued. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and he won. So I think what we're trying to do is understand how this policy is in reaction to that, which obviously the Supreme Court said was okay. And I think we're maybe having a hard time understanding the way we would implement this based on the way it's written.
By Neola.
Correct, yes. So, as a suggestion, what we might be able to do is we could also table this one. I could bring some ADs, even some coaches maybe, to August, and let's kind of like get a little more into this in terms of understanding it from the Neola perspective, and then understanding what happens on the ground. Because the last thing I want to do is create an issue for us that we don't need, right? And we don't need to be a Supreme Court case either. So I'd rather, if you're comfortable with that, we'll spend a little more time on it.
Yeah, those 3 sentences in that third paragraph are really, I mean, they're kind of working with and against each other. I mean, to Mr. Zenobia's point, I think they're trying to define it. You know, you had mentioned maybe they're muddying it. I think they're trying to define it because in that second sentence, they talk about it being reasonably construed as an endorsement or approval of the message by the school or district. You know, and then after that, they say this shouldn't interfere with the staff's free expression. So, yeah, I think it'd be good to table it and maybe just explore that a little bit better.
Sure.
Mr. Watt?
Yeah, I agree. You know, as somebody who's coached, not necessarily at officially for school, but in youth programs, if I were presented with this, I would go nowhere near a group of kids who were praying after a football game, and I don't think that's what we're attempting to do here.
Right.
So I kind of like the idea of tabling it and perhaps seeing if we can't work out some wording that we feel will send a clear direction. And I use coaching because that's what I'm familiar with, but for all district personnel that may be involved in either classroom or club or extracurricular activities. So.
Mr. Moore?
No, I agree. I think that it can be misconstrued, so we should table it. But I'm looking forward to August where you will invite those coaches in, and so we can understand, you know, how to best reword the policy. So, yeah, I'm all for tabling it as well. I agree with Mr. Watt. So.
So that works.
Mr. Watt?
I would move to table revisions to policy 8,000 regarding religious and patriotic ceremonies and observances to our August committee meeting.
Second.
Second. Before we go ahead with the vote, did you have something further,
I
Mr.
did.
Browski, while we're on it?
Yes. So I guess it would be paragraph 6. The last sentence, however, such exercise or expression may be limited to lunch periods or other non-instructional time periods. So it's not saying it will be, it basically could be. It
Could
may
be.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of tabling? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? This passes 5-0. All right, let's move on to policy 8802, patriotic activities and observances.
Okay. This one, I think, is a little more straightforward. It just takes the patriotic part out of the previous policy. We fly the flag every day. We do the Pledge of Allegiance every day. And there was an option, the last paragraph was an option that we selected to put in on the district may offer students and staff a moment of silence to commemorate a significant event that has significant impact on the community. The decision to offer a moment of silence will be the building principal's and/or the superintendent's decision. No moment of silence shall be described by school officials with reference to religious symbolism or activity. We selected that one for your consideration just because we thought there might be times like you have something like the parade incident, you have something like something of that nature where maybe there is even a county-wide moment of silence or there's a city-wide something. Like, we didn't want to have the miss an opportunity to do something like that if indeed it presented itself. So, or be in violation of a policy if we said we couldn't participate in something like that. So that was the rationale and thought process behind adding that as an option.
Any comments or discussion on this policy? Mr. Watt?
Yeah, this is just an administrative thing. Is there anything about tabling the previous policy for further consideration that precludes us from adopting this one now? I mean, I know you said that this was created as a result of pulling this patriotic piece out of policy
8800.
8800. Would we create any sort of quandary by having perhaps policies that say the same thing or roughly the same thing in two different places?
I don't believe so in this instance, because this is all of the patriotic references from the previous policy being just removed and put over here. So the other policy is the one that we tabled is all religion, and this one is all patriotic. So I think you can approve this one if you feel comfortable.
Right, so, yeah, in the creation of the new policy, we're removing that and making a whole new policy, so there really isn't any redundancy between the two.
They say the same thing in both places today. So if we had 8,000 still in place and 8,800 still in place, and we adopted 8802, we're adopting the exact same language plus that additional paragraph you added. We don't have anything that's contrary.
So for a period of like 2 months, you'd have two policies that talk about patriotic. One would talk about religious and patriotic, and one that talked about just patriotic. You're
On
right.
the patriotic side, we wouldn't have anything in conflict, right? There's no change to what we said, and I didn't compare it.
You'd have the addition of the moment of silence
Right, that's
piece.
the only thing
Okay.
that's different is that addition.
Any other comments on this policy? Then I would be looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
I'll
Do I have a
second that.
Seconded by Mr. Borowski. Any other comments or discussion on this one? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 5-0. And then on to our so our ninth action item is revisions to the compliance officer and district addresses. So this affects a number of policies here, all of which are a change from the position, correct? Dr. Seeley?
Yes, I'm just counting. I think there's 12 or 13 in this series. So you got this monster packet, but most of them were these really minimal pieces. So part of it is that we moved, right? So all of our 222 Maple addresses have to be changed in these policies to 301 Hyde Park with our new zip code as well. And then the second part is for compliance officers, Dr. Cook has to be removed since he'll be moving on to McGuanago. And then he's replaced by Jennifer Gennerman as deputy superintendent, and also the addition of Mark Lennerer, the director of student services, because in the compliance officer arena, we have to have a male and a female. So Jen can be of assistance to Sharon, and then Mark also would be added. So in all of those policies, there's one also on dual language where D. Garcia is the person, she remains, but the address just has to be changed. And so in all of those policies, that's the substance of what you're being asked to approve.
Any questions or comments? Maybe one thing, I don't know if anyone had anything specific to discuss in any one of these policies. If not, we can take them all together and, okay. All right, well, I would be looking for a motion to approve all of the revisions, naming the district compliance officers. So moved by
And
Mr.
district address.
And address changes, yeah.
And address changes. Let's see. All right. Mr. Moore, and then,
I can second it, but yeah,
Second.
be sure to add the and district address
Okay.
to that motion.
and district address. Seconded by Mrs. Voigt. All right. So all those in favor of approving the policies naming the district compliance officers and district address. Aye.
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 All those opposed? Passes 5-0.
Just a friendly comment.
Yes.
I might
Ms.
make
Voigt.
it. Was there really necessary to print all of this out for us when it was really like a find and replace? I, went through it on
Sure.
Word docs,
Yep.
more efficiently, because I just went, like, just click it, look for highlighting, and especially just one side on all of these sheets of paper. It's like, I thought I had this like 10-hour project when I saw my envelope come on Friday.
sure.
I know, 3 days to do it.
And I had 3 days to do it with graduation.
Yeah, no, we appreciate the feedback. We can think differently about that going forward, sir, certainly.
Okay, moving on to our government relations portion of our discussion and information items. We have 2 discussion items. Our first is our state budget update.
All right. Well, we had this already a couple of times when there was nothing happening on the state budget front, and then all of a sudden on Thursday night, this tentative deal got set up between the governor and the Republican leaders on K-12 funding. So we keep learning about what is all included in this tentative deal, and it looks like $325 per student in each year of the biennium. That's coming off of the last state biennial budget that was $0 in both of those years. So $325 is a significant increase. $50 million to improve reading and literacy, which we'll talk about that under the legislative updates. We got some more information on that today. There is $30 million, to continue the governor's initiative to support mental health services statewide. Special education reimbursement going from 30% to 33.3% in terms of reimbursement. So it's a slight increase for us. That probably means right around $600,000 less that we transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 27, but still that number is inching closer and closer to 20 million. So it's a small step, certainly forward. The biggest piece for us is the increase in the low revenue ceiling from 10,000 to 11,000. And if you remember the document that we shared with our legislators and we shared at the day at the Capitol and we also shared at the Joint Finance Committee hearing, on the back page of that, we talked specifically about revenue limit authority, and we showed that in Waukesha County, we're the second lowest spending school district. That all got put into place back in 1993 when revenue caps came in, and wherever you were spending, you got solidified there, and we were low spending and conservative at that time, and we've remained that way for many, many years. So the ability for us to potentially go from 10,206 to 11,000 is a significant opportunity that the board will get to consider if this continues to move forward. So it is an interesting discussion, and we'll see. I think it is still considered tentative, so we will see where it ultimately goes. But the $325 per pupil plus that low revenue ceiling relief could be pretty substantial for the school district of Waukesha. So we'll continue to monitor that very closely.
Any comments, discussion? Mr. Watt?
So, and maybe this is something that is better covered on the legislative update, because I know you mentioned, you talk about the reading and literacy.
We will.
Initiatives. One of the things I'm concerned about happening here is there are a number of districts who were ahead of the curve on some of this, Waukesha being one of them. We've spent our money on curriculum. We're spending money on professional development, and if I understand the bill correctly, there are a number of districts now that are going to be statutorily required to change their literacy method, right, from whatever to science of reading.
Yes.
And they're going to get state assistance with the purchase of that curriculum and the training.
50% reimbursement on the curriculum, yes.
Now, I don't know what that means in terms of what it would mean for us, but I would like to see whether it's us as a district or WASB or somebody going back to the to the legislators or joint finance and saying, for those districts that were getting it right, that were ahead of the curve, there needs to be a reimbursement for what they have already spent, up to what they would have gotten had they waited.
It's interesting.
So again, maybe it's better for us to discuss that during the legislative update, but I would assume that, you know, we may otherwise miss out on receiving funds that other districts who were not as forward-thinking will receive and won't have to make the same investment we did. I mean, imagine if we hadn't, we'd have those funds available to us for this, you know, the stuff that we discussed regarding security in our facility and finance
Sure.
committee, so.
That's a good point. Yeah, and this is still under development,
Right.
so, yeah, we'll talk more about it in the
we
next
can
part,
go
too.
back and ask them to consider adding
Sure,
as part of the negotiations.
that's a good point.
I believe Ms. Foyt was first, and then Mr. Moore.
This is on the discussion docket for SWSA tomorrow morning, right?
Yes, I believe it
I
is.
think it's a really good thing, great point to bring up. You know, that as they're lobbying for it, that why should we, be penalized? Or not penalized, but be shortchanged.
We essentially would be penalized, I think, in essence, because we're missing out on funds that other districts who weren't taking the steps we were, will get the benefit, and we won't.
Mr. Moore?
Right, and that's true, because we did everything right. We were ahead of the curve, we were forward-thinking, we pre-planned our curriculum. In fact, we were ahead even for this next school year. And so I think it's only fair to go back to them, and, I had the pleasure of going with you, Dr. Siebert and Board President Tim Madison, to meet with those legislators as well. And I think that I think it would be right to go back to them and ask that question and say, hey, we did everything right. We significantly exceeded your expectations for our district. And so is there any way that, for those districts who did what we did, are we going to be able to be, compensated their reimbursement? So I think that's a very fair question. And I look forward to seeing what the answer would be.
Sure. That's a good thought.
Any other comments on this particular piece on literacy? I know if this were to go through, it wouldn't be until the 24-25 school year, correct? So,
Yeah,
Reading there?
the reading part we're talking?
yes.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch. I've got a nice handout for you when we get to that in the legislative update that kind of talks about some of those dates. I mean, some of the things don't go into effect for 5 years. So there's kind of a workup period on a number of those fronts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ms. Foyt?
Going back to the discussion about the budget, recommendations, I just want to compliment the design of the handout, sharing the Waukesha story. And those of you who did go to the Capitol and do the lobbying, they went along with it, and having Representative Scott Allen propose this exact kind of concept to the legislative, discussion, for the Finance and Facilities Committee, for the Joint Finance Committee. So it's like, I'm so impressed with,
Thank you.
what we've done in that context.
Yeah, no, thank you. That deserves a lot of, Darren did a lot of work on some of his pieces. Mary Jo put the whole piece together. And then, as Mr. Moore said, Mr. Borowski and Dr. Piasek, himself, Dr. Cook and I were able to go to Madison, and we were able to present at Joint Finance. And we're developing, kind of back to our old Government Relations Committee, we're trying to develop, and we are developing those relationships with our legislators, which are critically important to try to move things forward. And we're fortunate to have legislators that want to learn and want to talk and want to engage with us and believe in the work that we're doing. So we're pretty fortunate that way.
Just related to that, I
Yes.
think, as we're looking at the bills, again, Representative Allen was like one of the co-sponsors for many of the ones that are the initiatives that we're looking at getting through right now, which I think, that's amazing that we have had an influence and that he has taken that role.
We did meet with his staff that day.
We did.
But I would share your applause to the handout, because I expressed that same thing where, day coming back from the Capitol, that I thought that handout made us look very good and prepared, and I think it did a great job of a snapshot of our district, and then the things we were advocating for laid out. Not only the rationale for it, but we gave them numbers. This is what we, or percentages, and I think that
And what's coming out is quite similar to what was in the handout, which is interesting. So we'll see where it goes, but that's just an overview.
Mr. Moore?
I agree, and I will say, again, and this is my last thought, with Mrs. Voigt and Mr. Brodsky, that the handout is well put together. Again, it was such a great opportunity to go to Madison with you all and share our story. But not only just our story, but like he said, Mr. Brodsky said, the numbers. I mean, we like I said before, we significantly exceeded those expectations. So when we met with those legislators, we shared our goals, where our footprint was, where our ranking was, where our DPI report cards were, and so I'm going to be looking forward to that answer on that reimbursement, and because I just think that we did everything right, and so I think the right thing to do is to go back to them and ask for those districts who did everything right, not only were forward thinking, but delivered those results for students academically, and we're on top of the curve. What are we going to get in return for that? So,
Thank you.
Any further comments on the state budget update? Let's move on to the legislative update, which we are already into a little bit. Any discussion on that?
Yeah, so what I thought we could do each time we meet, which is every other month, is there won't always be budget topics, right? But there should always be some kind of educational legislative, well, not always, but generally there'll be some, right? So anytime there is, we'll try to pick a sampling, and if not all of them, and go through them together. So I picked 5 today, in addition to the early literacy instruction bill that we'll spend the most time on probably. But again, the first one, requiring 1/2 credit of financial literacy for high school graduation. This is something that we already do. We had the discussion around economics at the T&L level and then the full board level. All of our kids take a 1/2 credit of economics, and our board policy 5460 on graduation says that a student must have participated in curriculum relating to financial literacy, which is fulfilled by the economics requirement in order to earn a diploma. So again, another area where I think we fully support financial literacy, and we also have financial literacy classes outside of economics that kids can take through the business department. But I think it's a great bill to help more kids have that experience, and whether it's some people like Dave Ramsey, and some people liked Clark Howard, and some people liked others, but I mean, they all have a similar message, right, in terms of the earlier that kids can learn to save and have the power of compound interest in their favor, the better off they'll be. So I just thought it was something to share, and something that we should feel good about, that we're already helping kids have that financial literacy experience. So we'll see where that one goes. The next one is on the Youth Apprenticeship Program and Career and Technical Grants. Here again, this is a strength of the School District of Waukesha. We just had a number of celebrations at the high schools where kids are joining with WCTC to have great experiences, and we have a number of kids that go to various different businesses where they have work experiences. What this bill would do is it would increase the amount per student from $1,100 up to $1,700 that would come to the district for kids that participate in the Youth Apprentice program. So that would be significant. And then the other thing it would do is it would take it from $1,000 to $2,000 for each kid who participates in a actual, the term is like a career pathway experience. So through the state of Wisconsin, there are 16 different career pathways. Sometimes they're called career clusters, and they range in anything. I was going to pull them up here, from health and human services to more hands-on types of experiences in the trades. There's just a number of different experiences: agriculture, architecture, government and public relations, human services, hospitality and tourism, education, manufacturing, marketing. I mean, they run the gamut. So when we have kids that, we also get money for that. So I think it's something that we would really benefit from because of the significant investment we've made in those types of opportunities for our students. The third one is posting the child abuse and neglecting reporting hotline in buildings. Oftentimes in education, we talk about things that are unfunded mandates. This really wouldn't cost much, right? And it would just be another way to help kids that are experiencing stuff at home, maybe, or in their personal life that they don't know where to reach out to, or are not comfortable talking maybe to a trusted adult in the school or a family member, to be able to have a resource that they could use to get some assistance. So I thought it was an interesting bill that actually our very own Representative Allen is behind as well, that we talked about earlier. So we'll see where that one goes. There is one here on maintaining a lifetime teaching administrator or pupil services license. That goes back a while ago when, that was during the Scott Walker governorship, when teaching licenses, as Mrs. Voigt knows, we used to have to renew educator licenses every 5 years. You had to take 6 credits of coursework. Mr. Moore, you'd know this too. You had to take 6 credits of coursework, and then you would get renewed. Governor Walker did a provision where they became lifetime licenses again, which there used to be back in I think those went out of style maybe in the 80s, 70s.
One.
Did you have one? Yes.
It
So-
is that far back.
Yes, it goes back quite a ways. But now they came back. So for example, like I have a lifetime license. You don't have to do anything but a background check every 5 years. But to address the educator shortages, I think this bill would be aligned to, and maintain people in the pool to be selected from. It would change that the DPI wouldn't have to say that if somebody wasn't employed for a period of 5 or more consecutive years, they would lose their license. All they would have to do is be in a K-12 setting for 1 hour per day per semester. So they could do very limited service, but maintain their license. That could be somewhat helpful probably in the sub-pool or in other pools for people trying to have some kind of employment still, and districts that are always searching for people to fill various positions. So that'll be interesting to see where that one goes. And then there's also another one that I thought was somewhat interesting. It prohibits the use of common school funds for the purchase of obscene materials. And that obscene materials are designated in State Statute 944.212C, which means the average person applying contemporary community standards would find appeals to the prurient interest if taken as a whole. Under contemporary community standards, describes or shows sexual conduct in a patently offensive way and lacks serious literary, artistic, political, educational, or scientific value if taken as a whole. So we've had a lot of discussion over time on that type of concept. So I thought that was an interesting bill that coming forward as well. So we'll see where that one ultimately goes. And then the big one, obviously, is this early literacy instruction bill.
Didn't get that. Could you try again?
God, every time I hit a golf ball, she talks to me too. It must be the sound of it. It's weird. Anyways, I digress. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is an article that was in the Journal Sentinel, but it also, I believe it was written from the Appleton Post-Crescent. And what it basically does is it takes and it breaks down the 11 things that this bill, as currently written, and again, it's still under development, would do. And so I thought it really provided kind of a nice step-by-step outline. So the first is it would establish an Office of Literacy at the DPI that would sunset ultimately on July 1, 2028. And that's the office that would contract up to 64 full-time literacy coaches who would have science-based early literacy instruction background. And they'd be dispersed across the state based on third grade reading assessment scores and requests from schools for early literacy support. And they would not be allowed to use the method that they are calling 3Qing, which is essentially the balanced literacy approach, teaching kids to read based on meaning, sentence structure, visual cues, memorization. It would have to be focused on the science of reading, which is phonics, phonemic awareness, oral language development, vocabulary building, reading fluency, instruction in writing, and comprehension. So just a difference in trying to say, and it goes all the way down into colleges. You'll see, like, they wouldn't be able to teach the 3 cueing method. They would have to teach kids how to teach the science of reading, way of teaching reading. So that'd be the first piece. There would be a council that would recommend reading curricula, starting with the 24-25 school year. And it would be appointed by the state superintendent, the assembly speaker, and the Senate majority leader. And they would then recommend the curriculum that we talked about earlier that districts would have to pick from this sampling of whatever the committee would come up with. And then the Joint Finance Committee ultimately would approve what's ever on that list before it became available to districts to buy. And that's where my understanding is that the 50% reimbursement for the districts, that part of that 50 million that's set aside for this as it stands, would be helping districts pay for 50% of that new curriculum. It would also change, it would make districts get rid of the 3 cueing materials, and that means school boards, charter schools, and private schools participating in the parental choice program would all have to adhere to the science of reading beginning in 24-25. And the teacher preparation programs, like we talked about earlier, would have to change, and DPI couldn't license people that weren't trained in the science of reading going forward, so the university level would be involved here. There'd be greater emphasis on third graders performing on reading assessments. And if you do a little research into like a Mississippi, this is basically a Mississippi model. And they went from like 50th to like 26th in a very small period of time in terms of their reading proficiency. So third graders who score in the lowest category would not move on to fourth. That's one of the sticking points of this retention component for third graders. So there would be intensive instructional services that would be required for kids when they weren't meeting criteria, including, like in Mississippi, they have a robust summer program. So a kid wouldn't know if they were being retained until they went through this entire summer program to see if they could get up to grade level. And that would go into effect starting in 2025. It would begin, and then it wouldn't, it would go, actually, you'd have to adopt these policies by 2025, July of 2025, and then it would go into effect in 28, 29. So you'd have quite a bit of time to work up to that. The reading assessments would be bolstered. So if you're at risk, you're under 25th percentile, you start to get screened more often. Kids in 4K twice a year, K through 3 times a year. And then the kids keep getting more and more interaction and intervention. They'd have personal plans for at-risk students. Weekly monitoring and shared after 10 weeks of interventions, parents would know how the kids were doing, and the DPI would pay for all of those assessments. Beginning in 25-26, the school board would need to submit a report to the DPI showing that it's only using the assessments that have been approved by the DPI as well. And also, third grade reading would be added to the state report card. So right now, there's various different checkpoints, but there'd be an addition of third grade reading onto the state report card. And then every year, by July 15th, we'd need to tell the DPI how we're doing. And then the DPI by November 30th would have to tell the legislature how all the school districts were doing. And the last component of it is that parents can file a complaint if they think their school isn't compliant with teaching the science of reading. So there's quite a bit in this bill, and it's pretty significant, but there are, I want to say I read there was like 30 states that were kind of in this pattern. So I think, quite honestly, it's quite interesting, and I think it's something designed to really, hopefully, I think the thought behind it is it's really going to help kids be more productive and more proficient, but we'll see.
Mr. Moore?
Yes. So with third grade, I don't think people, maybe Mrs. Boyd can chime in with me through your experience, but and I was a third grade teacher. I think, this is interesting because third grade is a very critical grade level. And we know the statistics with third grade, that if students cannot read by third grade, that they're going to be spiraling down in terms of academic success throughout secondary school and post-secondary school. But not only that, students who statistics show, and it's time to be honest about this, that they don't know how to read. If students do not know how to read by third grade, if they're not proficient, then they're more likely to be to commit crime. They're more likely to be illiterate as adults. And so this is very critical that we are taking a different approach now so that we can teach the science of reading. I have spoken with teachers in the District of Waukesha who have came to me and said that they some students have, they're concerned with their reading abilities and dyslexia, and students not understanding decoding and also the science of reading. They have expressed those concerns to me and said that they felt stuck because there was no avenue on how to really do corrective reading, if that makes sense, or because the curriculum was not designed that way. So I'm definitely looking forward to this, and I would. With that being said, though, I do wish that there is some open autonomy for the school district to determine what we see is best in terms of the curriculum that includes science of reading. So what I mean by that is, okay, the state is telling us that, we have to implement these things, which I'm fine with that. However, I do think that some autonomy needs to be left for the school districts themselves to say, okay, we'll meet the science of reading with the curriculum requirements, but can we have some autonomy to decide what curriculum or what source of learning, resources of learning that we see fit best for our district, that we can incorporate. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does.
So that it gives us more of the local autonomy.
Control.
Yes. So
Yeah.
Any other comments on the literacy piece while we're on it? One area of concern that I have looking at all of what they've outlined and potentially what they'll do in literacy is, although the funds may be provided to an extent, how do we find the people to actually teach? One area would be dyslexia, for example. Although they want to identify children with disabilities in reading, we still need the people to teach those areas, and I know
Yeah.
it's thin everywhere that I've taught with. So I don't know if putting out all of this outline, maybe a little bit to Mr. Moore's point, although the money may be there, how can we really get up and running to meet some of these goals, even if it is 3-4 years in advance? So I
Right.
don't know maybe what your thought is on that, Dr. Sieber.
Yeah, well, the challenge is always the people, right? And so what we often do, even with coaches, right, is we take really great teachers out of the classroom to help coach others, or we take really great teachers out of the classroom to be principals, right? And so then ultimately you're kind of like decimating yourself sometimes, right? Because you're taking that great teacher, but you also want to give people opportunity when they want those opportunities. So when we're talking 64 across the state, that should be doable. There'll be a number of people that, if they can gather them from various areas, I don't think they'd all have to be out of Madison necessarily, right? They can be dispersed from different areas of the state and just report to the DPI. So I think it's possible, definitely. My question would be, how do 64 literacy coaches help 400 plus school districts? Like that's always the rub with this stuff. But I think more than anything, you have to give them credit for at least. I mean, this is something that has the potential to change the projection of reading in the state of Wisconsin. So
For sure.
I'm more than willing to give them the benefit of the doubt for trying, and I think like anything, we'll grow into it.
Mr. Moore. Sorry, I saw Mr. Moore first.
So, and I'm with you on that, Dr. Sieber. I just my other question was for the teachers that were grandfathered in, who have started their teaching career before this new rollout. They've been licensed. They went through the teaching credentialing programs. They got what they needed to do. I mean, they got their credentials to teach, and they received their degrees. And even veteran teachers like Ms. Voigt, Ms. Koenig, for those teachers, let's say that they decided to go back to teaching, would they have to go back to the university with the new requirements, or are there going to be, what does the rollout plan look like for those teachers who are already grandfathered in the classroom? Are they going to have to, because I remember when I went through it, we just went through the regular program. So now, is there going to be PD professional development that the state's going to help us with to retrain those teachers on how to teach the science of reading, or are there going to be mandated that they go back and do a 3-credit course at a college or university to meet that requirement. What does that look like, or do you?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but I would guess they're not going to have to go back to college, right? It would be either these coaches at the state level or up to the districts through professional development to help people align to what it is that the new curriculum is. So that would be my thought.
Mr. Borowski?
I just wanted to clarify something you said, Dr. Siebert. So it sounds like you're saying, in your opinion, hiring the 64 statewide literacy coaches is doable, but you don't necessarily know if that's enough or don't think it's enough to cover the entire
Well,
state.
it's hard, yeah, and I'm not trying to be negative, because I don't really.
No, I know.
I just, it's a big state, and it's a big footprint, and I'm excited to see where it goes more than
Yeah.
anything.
Any other comments on any of the other bills? I know we've been on literacy here. There's several here to cover. The only one that I wanted to comment on, which I think was a step in the right direction, would be, had it and I lost it there. SB 304, which is prohibiting common school fund distributions to purchase obscene materials. I know it's outlined a little bit better in the statute. I think it may be a little vague, but I think it's going in the right direction. I know even a year ago, there was discussion around just elementary school, and this would certainly cover all grade levels, so I think that's a big plus, so. I don't know if there's any other comments to that, or of anything we've discussed? Mr. Watt, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say, I agree with you. I agree with the spirit of the bill. My concern with bills like this, like many, is the details, right? The devil's always in the details. And in this case, I think it's going to be around how they define obscenity. Is it going to be tied back to the state statutes that define it for criminal charging, or are they going to
Right.
define it differently? That would be the thing that I will be watching most closely as this progresses its way through the legislature.
All right, I believe we are done with all of our discussion items. Are there any recommendations for future meetings?
I have one that you brought up earlier that came today from WASB, about the idea, from the funding for the Office of School Safety. And just, again, this is one that hadn't been, the first exposure was the email that came out today. And just wondering, has the district been involved with Speak Up, Speak Out, the tip line that they reference?
Yes, we do have access to it.
Okay. And it would just, what would be, our district stand, on something like this? Is it something that we would want to lobby for, or, thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral,
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that they've done through Speak Up, Speak Out, as well as some of the other programs that have been beneficial to school districts, without doubt. It gives, Speak Up, Speak Out as a program where kids can just put in, if something's bothering them, confidentially, they can put it in, and it goes through this portal to the state that then responds to the kid and then forwards it to the district to handle. So it's a nice opportunity for kids, similar to the one we talked about with the reporting hotline, similar to that, but it's technologically based. So, yeah, I mean, I get copied on some of them. I mean, we get them every week. I mean, I don't get all of them. Dr. Cook gets some too, but it's used, definitely. So, yeah, I've just started to get some of that too, like within the last couple of days, on people reaching out around the Office of School Safety and their funding being eliminated from the Joint Finance Committee, so.
You had some feelings about it, David?
Actually, I don't.
Okay.
I was just using it as an example of something WASB calls out as needing action. So, I mean, I read what they said, and from what they laid out, I would say, oh, this sounds bad. But I don't know what the rationale was from Joint Finance in cutting the funding. Do they feel it's duplicative? Is there something else in the budget that, if adopted, would replace what's I don't know. So, so to answer your question, Mrs. Voigt, I don't have a specific position. I would like to learn more.
Okay. All right, any other recommendations for our next meeting? Then that will adjourn our meeting for this evening. We will be meeting again in August here in the boardroom. We don't have a date yet, but unless we do.
I think we do.
Oh, we do.
I should,
I'm sorry, I think it's August 7th.
it is,
Okay.
yeah, it's, I think it is too.
Maybe that's on
It
my,
might be August 6th. Let's see. No, Julie's right, it's August 7th.
we do have a date. It will be August 7th here in the boardroom at hopefully 7 o'clock.
That's right.
Thank you.